Just give it another couple of seconds just to let everyone drop into the webinar as people are joining. Welcome, welcome everybody. Great, so let's get started. So good morning everyone and welcome to today's webinar in association with Hiscox. My name is Katie Scott, I'm the editor at Insurance Times, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be chairing this morning's discussion, which marks our very first TechTalk Live event. So TechTalk Live is a brand new event series hosted by Insurance Times that is focused on exploring technology and innovation in UK GI. So today we will be digging into artificial intelligence, specifically around how AI can be used to boost efficiency and productivity in brokers' back office functions, as well as how the technology can help tackle common pain points. So joining me for this conversation, I have a fabulous range of panelists here. So we've got Adam Atkins, who's Head of Technology Underwriting at Hiscox, Dan Henry, who's Account CTO for Insurance and Investments at Microsoft, and Joe Newbury, Director at Brunel PI Brokers. So thank you very much for joining me today, guys. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Great. So let's dive in. So having chatted to you all prior to today's session, I know we have some great case studies coming up around the technology usage that supports brokers, which we'll dig into in a bit. But to start off and really set the scene, could you perhaps each highlight what you feel are the biggest challenges or pain points or bugbears with brokers' current back office functionality?
Sure. I'm happy to kick off from. So as Katie said, so I work for an insurance company, so I can't talk kind of directly to the broker back office functions, but the insurance company I represent has a strong broker bias. So we work closely with brokers and we think we understand what they need. And the biggest challenge from an insurer or underwriter point of view is service. So we always strive to want to give good service. Brokers expect good service. Clients expect good service naturally, and quite rightly as well. And I think the process of underwriting in some ways can challenge the ability to provide good service, in as much as the process of underwriting is looking at large quantities of information and making regulated decisions that could affect the profitability of the organisation you're underwriting on behalf of. And for me, it's always finding that balance between speed and detail. So whenever I interview new underwriters, I always ask that as kind of like a philosophical start to the question of, what's more important to you, speed or detail? And it's always really interesting kind of the response you get, because in my view, there kind of is a right answer, but it's also one of these where there isn't necessarily a right answer, because you always need detail, but absolutely, you need the speed as well. You need to deliver something meaningful and quickly. And I'm sure we've got many brokers joined us here today that have probably dealt with underwriters where it feels like there's unnecessary barriers being put up, with huge amounts of information being requested in order to progress a quote or to enact a change on a policy. And I can see, with my many dealings with brokers, that can be hugely frustrating. And I think that in a nutshell is the biggest challenge that insurers have. As the market becomes increasingly more competitive, we need to be excellent at servicing. We need to meet the needs of brokers quickly, efficiently, meaningfully, so that they can provide the onward service to clients. And that's been a challenge for the 10 years I've been in the industry, and it's a continual challenge. And as we progress these discussions, I'm sure we can talk a bit more about how AI can help ease some of those pain points. But service is the key one from an insurer point of view: speed, detail, finding the balance between the two of them.
Yeah, and I think that's quite a nice way to sort of segue into sort of our biggest frustrations. Service is pretty much the overarching view of how we feel that AI can help. I think the biggest frustration that we have is the sort of back office functionality and the sort of lack of automation with it. Is that it causes quite a detrimental impact to the sort of front end and the customer journey. To sort of give an example of that, the process of sort of renewing a client with an insurer is still really quite manual. So our clients have to complete manual proposal forms, which ask really quite similar questions every year. It can take days to fill these forms out. So a large firm may need input from various departments to complete that form, be it finance, ops, HR, legal, and this creates a bottleneck where the form really can't be completed until all of these departments have gathered the information and they've completed their various segments, which is super frustrating for our clients, particularly as they have to do it every year. It's the same process every year. So that creates problems for us, because it takes so long for them to complete it. They get frustrated. We don't get the renewal forms until sort of 2 weeks before the renewal period. We can't do a proper job of sort of broking these risks properly. But it also creates problems for us when we're looking to capture that sort of unstructured data that comes in the proposal forms, to use for our MI. So to sort of input that data into our CRM, we have to take the PDF of the form that the client has completed, and one of our team will like manually input those figures into the CRM. So it's super slow, it's cumbersome, and the whole sort of process of buying insurance is really quite unpleasant for our clients and for ourselves, really. So yeah, we're really super focused on improving that customer journey at Brunel, and that's where we feel really that where AI can help.
Yeah, I think just adding on to what you've mentioned, Joe, right? I mean, the brokers I work with in both the specialty and commercial space, the focus is trying to create a much more personable experience for the customer, right?
Yeah.
And as you said, Joe, if you're trying to spend a lot of time filling in forms and focusing on like frantically taking notes during those first meetings, it takes you away from that. But what I also hear is having to have a broad set of knowledge and across a number of different classes of business as well. You know, how can we help brokers to get up to speed in those different areas of business as well? And you know, we know especially in the specialty space, we're moving into a soft market, so there's going to be more entrants into the market as well, and that's going to mean that there's going to be more human resource or human capital moving into this space. How do we get them trained up as well, right? So kind of those different areas, and everything you guys have mentioned as well is definitely what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Thanks, guys. That really helps to set the scene here on sort of the use cases of why AI is being looked at here. I mean, in your perspective, what would you say is perhaps the biggest risk that's arising from these various challenges? Obviously, good service is the end goal here, but does that mean there's perhaps a greater risk of errors and omissions claims, or are there perhaps any other repercussions that could arise from having perhaps, like you were saying, Joe, these cumbersome, clunky back office processes that have got that paper element to them?
And Dan mentioned kind of the soft market conditions that we're experiencing at the moment. There's lots of new entrants into the market. As I've already said, kind of service is key. Joe's kind of backed that up. Everyone wants to move quicker, wants to move faster, wants to provide better service. But ultimately, we are regulated. We have responsibilities to our customers. You know, me as an underwriter, I've got responsibility to shareholders of the company to make sure that my decisions are well backed up. They're going to support profitability, but at the same time, we want to move fast for the purposes of giving good service to clients. And that does, Joe will talk, I'm sure, about kind of the errors and omissions exposure to him as a broker, but certainly to an insurer. If you don't get that balance right between speed and detail, and you skimp on the detail at the aid of getting things done quicker and faster, that could not solve the overall issue, because you could have, we're here to pay claims. We're here to sort out fortuitous situations that could be really meaningful to a client. And in the aid of trying to be faster, trying to be quicker, trying to be better, what you don't want to do is create a product or create a process that at the end loses sight of that end goal, which is a claim is to be paid. It's a complicated area, making sure that everything is covered off. Clients understand what they're buying, insurers understand what they're insuring, brokers are given the right advice, and the speed there could cause danger around the regulatory responsibility and the ultimate outcome of insurance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, yeah, just to touch on the sort of soft market conditions a little bit as well. I think I don't know whether Adam will attest to this, but when the market conditions have got to the point that they have done, and brokers are very, very keen to sort of pick up new business, it's quite easy to just focus on the price it's quite easy to focus on the premium
Yeah.
and not actually the coverage, and particularly when there are huge discrepancies between the policy wordings. As you look at sort of the technology policy wordings in the market, for example, there are huge discrepancies between the coverages actually offered in those insuring clauses. And when you've got, I know, relatively younger brokers that are keen to sort of cut their teeth and are keen to sort of get these new business wins across the line, they're not necessarily focusing on what actual coverage the client needs. And I think when you're looking at speed and that, there is a huge, you're focusing so much on sort of the admin side of things as well, that you spend less and less time talking to insurers and talking to your clients. You're not really understanding what they're actually looking to get out of their policy, and the sort of when you're looking at a PI policy, like what are the sort of exposures the client has actually got. So yeah, I think when you're focusing on the back office and the back office is super slow, and then you've still got targets to hit new business wise as well, you're not necessarily going to be focusing too much on the coverages offered. So I think it's a AI can help with that. AI can help you. I mean, we can talk about use cases later on, but the process of reviewing policy wordings, large language models are very good at analyzing reams of text, and policy wordings are just that. It's just text. So I think that we can talk about the use cases slightly more later on, but it can be helpful. I think one of the other things as well that is a bigger repercussion for us, because we're a new start. I mean, we've only been trading for just over a year. So new business is definitely more crucial to us than other brokers, because without it, we wouldn't survive. We need to be out on the road. We need to be on the phone. We need to be networking to build relationships and bring clients in. I mean, insurance broking, although other people may not agree, I feel still very much a service-driven industry, and winning business is obviously, we are winning business just by virtue of sort of actually visiting clients at their offices. Like it's quite important to people, and spending a lot of our time on admin and creating documents and inputting data will sort of effectively directly impact our bottom line, because we're not spending that time meeting clients. So yeah, I think because we're a new start, we are more flexible to be able to sort of create sort of these efficiencies in our back office. And that allows us to sort of spend time doing what we actually enjoy doing, which is sort of going and meeting people and talking to clients and insurers and being in the market and forging these relationships. So yeah, I think there's certainly impacts on sort of an E&O perspective when you're sort of not necessarily advising clients on the coverages because you're not got the time to, but also from our perspective, inefficiencies will also impact our bottom line, because we're not going out and meeting our clients.
That's a really great point as well. I mean, if you spend more time on the mundane tasks, you can't actually work on what makes brokers good at what they do, right? Which is understanding the customer and actually trying to help them work out what's best to fit their needs. I think just on a separate lens, another big risk that we definitely need to start preparing for is the unpredictable climate risk, right? And how that can start to impact policies. You know, we can't always just use historical data and go, right, that's what we know about. You know, we need to start thinking about how we can start incorporating real world data into decisions. That then feeds into that component of AI as well. So, you know, you're not going to get huge amounts of value without great data. I mean, Joe and Adam, you both mentioned, like, you know, the huge amounts of data that are in the policies themselves or the, you know, the customer information, but it's like, how can we then add in, you know, public sources of data as well that can help us make decisions?
That's a good point, Dan. And I think you're talking, you know, very strongly there to, like, I say emerging risks. Cyber is no longer really an emerging risk market. It's been around a long time, but that is one class of business where you simply can't look at what happened before, extrapolate it out. Or you need to look at risk vectors that are happening right now, yesterday. You know, looking at horizon scanning, what's over the hill. Really good point.
No, yeah, some really fascinating points there. Thanks, guys. And obviously, Joe, you mentioned there about alluded to some case studies and examples of what you guys have been doing. It'd be great to find out from each of you, really, in terms of what you've seen of brokers turn into AI as well as generative AI that creates new content. You know, how have the businesses, particular brokers, used AI to benefit these back office functions and to support, like you said, that bottom line growth?
Sure. Yeah, conscious not to give too many of our secrets away, but yeah. So we're partnering with a firm called Recorder, and I think I mentioned a lot of our frustrations about the lack of automation in the renewal process, and that's something that we're really looking to focus on. So we're building a system. It's in build at the moment, to sort of automate the renewal process as much as possible. So what we're trying to build is this system that will allow AI to sort of digest data a lot quicker. So we're looking to sort of convert that unstructured data that we get from from these proposal forms, and extrapolate that and sort of put that into structured data. So what that means from a sort of example version is that we'll be able to get a proposal form. We can drag and drop that into our CRM, and all that data will be extrapolated, and that would pre-populate that into our CRM. So all of the sort of data we'll need will be there, and it'll also be there for next year. So we can sort of pre-populate that into a sort of Brunel branded proposal form for next year, for the client to sort of complete a renewal. And it seems so simple, but it basically allows our clients to be able to sort of renew their form and complete all the form with it, hopefully within sort of five clicks, which is so much quicker than sort of what they're doing at the moment. So this is a sort of a human in the loop process where sort of the AI is doing that heavy lifting, but the broker is ultimately doing the sort of checking the data to ensure it's quality at the end. So allows me to sort of focus on giving sort of the best advice to the client, based on sort of what has changed in the sort of their proposal form. And the client will only really be asked to sort of refresh the sort of the sort of updated data and all that static data about the address, which at the moment they have to complete every year. Like how often are you actually changing offices? Like not very often. All of the processes that you've got in place, the cyber controls that you've got in place, for example, you sort of at the moment you have to tick every box if you've done that. Like realistically, you're not going to be changing your cyber controls year on year. Then yes, there may be a couple of extra questions that an insurer may be asking this year because of certain impacts on the sort of cyber security space, but they're predominantly going to be very similar. And so the whole process of filling out the same form every year and sort of completing that static data every year is really sort of cumbersome. So we're sort of getting rid of that, and allowing clients to effectively just update the sort of turnover figures or the sort of contract figures, data that will change year on year. So that will make things a lot quicker for our client, and it'll be sent in a sort of a link that will then allow multiple teams to be working on that form at the same time. So that also then gets rid of the bottleneck of waiting for one team to complete their section of the form and then have another team to complete it. So we're hoping that the vast majority of our clients, because of the sort of way that we can pick out that unstructured data, will be able to renew their form within, and we'll get that back within 24 hours. So that will, hopefully change things about our end. And that will ultimately lead to sort of higher retention rates because our clients aren't necessarily going to be, one, sending that form to anyone else, and two, they're not going to have the same frustrations of filling in that form every year. They'll if another broker's not offering that, then why would they then go back to completing the manual form every year? And also, it will lead to higher win rates for us as well from a new business perspective. Quite a powerful thing to be saying you don't have to fill out a proposal form ever again. You can just sort of click 5 clicks and be done with it. So that's something that we're really sort of focusing on. and also creates efficiencies for us as a broker, because we're not sort of inputting that data manually every year. And yeah, hopefully that allow us to win more business and sort of retain more business moving forward.
No, it sounds great. When are you looking to go live with that, Joe?
You never know with these things. Hopefully by the start of June.
Oh, no, fantastic. No, it sounds like a brilliant project.
Yeah.
Adam, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I can talk about it again from an insurer perspective, and there's kind of two lenses you can look through. You can look through at the macro level, so kind of from a view looking down, if you like, what can we do to enact big change? And Joe's kind of use of the word static data there. I like that. There's loads of static data in insurers. Insurer appetites do change, what they can accept from a risk point of view, but not drastically. We're a specialist insurer. We stick to what we know. We stick to our niches, and we're looking at, and we're in the process of use cases to triage submissions. So from a new business point of view, we've got lots of static data that says, we absolutely can't do these types of insurance or these types of businesses for these reasons, and we haven't done for the last 10 years. So, that's static data that you don't need a person to spend, 48 hours on an SLA to look at something to say no. It's almost, think about Joe. Joe puts a submission over to Hiscox, and immediately, almost from the minute he sends the email, gets a response back, killing the demand there and then. He probably doesn't want to hear lots of no's all the time, but he'd prefer a fast no than a slow no. So it's things like that we're looking at from a macro level. But at the same time, where we are able to say yes, it's getting to the right place as quickly as possible, or where it's an easy yes that doesn't really need kind of underwriter interaction. It's a yes, we can do this, and here it is. It's the speed at a macro level, but at the small end. Of the general insurance market, kind of your e-traded business, your small package policies, those sorts of things. And then on the flip side, I'd be looking at the micro side of things, so the bigger business stuff. So some of the things that Joe will be broking, where it does require underwriter attention, it requires personal interaction. It's moving away from the mundane and stopping underwriters. And if we talk about how underwriters really work, and this isn't going to be the same for everybody, but if you're looking at a large business to see whether you can insure them, an underwriter will tend to have company's house up, looking at company accounts. They'll have a website open. They'll have the broker presentation or proposal form open as well, and they'll be flitting between the three of them, in between answering calls and doing emails and Teams and all of that sort of stuff. And it can be a tiring process on the brain and a long process, but seeing AI as a tool that allows you to summarize large amounts of information, or get AI to do that for you. And a live use case of something I did earlier this week. So the law firm DAC Beechcroft put out a really good article recently around changes to data laws and what that might mean kind of in the years to come. It was something like a 72-page document, and really, really interesting insight. Definitely someone like me, I was going to say, is excited to read. That makes me sound incredibly sad, but I need to read for my job. And you can, we use Copilot, which Dan Henry will be very pleased to hear. And very simply, I just dropped that article, downloaded it from the website as a PDF, stuck it in Copilot, and said, "Can you summarize this for me?" And I got a neat kind of 6 bullet pointed summary of the document. And then you could prompt from that, tell me more about bullet point 6. What does that mean for the UK market as opposed to global? And in the space of 25 minutes, I had a pretty good handle on the way that had kind of played out. And it's the same for looking at risk presentations. It's pull out the pertinent points. Can you highlight from this document where this information is, and those sorts of things. Aside from that, some really basic quick wins around call recording and getting AI to give you a summary of the particular call, so that on the call you can be present, you can be there, you're not scribbling stuff down, you're just immersed in the broker conversation or the client conversation, you're gathering all the information, and knowing at the end of it you've almost got a virtual assistant that won't have missed anything. They won't have, you won't have to try and decipher your handwriting that you were scribbling down whilst trying to maintain eye contact with who you're talking to. Lots of things like that really help with the efficiencies.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with the trying to read your own handwriting point for sure. Dan, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, the guys covered off like a lot of the different use cases I'm already seeing. Obviously, you know, that there's a very common flow, customer sending documents to brokers and brokers to underwriters, and it's how can we actually extract the insights out of that with generative AI. As Adam, you mentioned, obviously around having that co-pilot whilst you're having that meeting with the customer and being able to check, have I asked every question that I need to check, you know, for the proposal. But another interesting one I've seen customers exploring is, you know, when it comes to the claims process and you're getting information from legal organizations who are sending it over to the carriers and the brokers, and it is very legal heavy content, right? How do we make that explainable to a consumer or to a business, and actually being able to use something like Copilot and saying, you know, simplify this for me and make this understandable to someone who isn't a legal professional is really powerful. But then, you know, I mentioned before about, you know, brokers needing to get skilled up on a broad set of different areas. I was listening to a really interesting article by Wall Street Journal this morning who was saying that their tech lead was saying search engines are really good for when you know what you're looking for, but actually GPT based, you know, tools are really great when you don't know what you don't know and you need to kind of just get some guidance.
Sure.
And so that can be really powerful. So, you know, we can start to blend those experiences to get more from technology.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating, really excellent point there. And I
Mm.
wanted to just pick up on something that you guys have mentioned as well about, you know, having that time to talk to clients, that in-person meeting element. Obviously, broken businesses are very sort of service-led, as you were saying, Joe, in particular. So how can we really marry the AI element with that in-person element? Because obviously a lot of people may be looking at it and thinking that's chalk and cheese. How can this work together?
I'm happy to kick off on this one, if that's all right. So, and I think something quite fascinating there. So when I entered the insurance industry in 2014. I remember shortly after joining the industry, I remember reading a news article, and it was the top 10 most likely jobs to be replaced by a robot in the next 5 years. And insurance underwriter was top of the list. And I thought, oh, brilliant. I've just entered the industry. It's about to, you know, fall flat on its face. And look, I think that was a view for some time, because it was a view of, you know, well, underwriters just making decisions based on past data, kind of like down what we were talking about earlier, which is less relevant nowadays. But I think what's missed from that is that there's always going to be a need for the personal touch. There's always going to be a need for, you know, high-ranking decision makers in large organizations. They want to buy insurance that they understand, and they want to engage with a knowledgeable broker. You look at Joe's area of work, you look at who Joe is and why he's successful. You know, he's very well thought of in the market. That's because of who he is and, you know, who Joe Newbury is. And I think that comes from him getting in front of people, him talking, him adding value. And I think previously we might have thought of, you know, me reading that article, AI is here to replace me, or robots are here to replace me. I think it's, in my view, it's evolving. It's evolution, not revolution. We're not replacing, we are enhancing. And I personally think that, I kind of said, you know, you're on a client call, you're on a broker call, you can just be there, you can just be present, you can spend more time doing those meaningful things, reaching decisions more quickly through the use of AI as a tool. And I think that's the key word. It's tool. It's using AI as a tool to enhance existing practices. Definitely, I'm sure there are elements of the industry that probably can be replaced or automated to such a degree where there's less human impact, but that isn't to replace the human. That's to move the human from an area they probably don't need to be to an area where they're in front of a client or where they're adding real service value. So yeah, I think it's definitely view AI as a tool, see it as a means to evolve in the industry, not replace.
Yeah, I think there's a really nice anecdote that explains that quite well. Is that when IBM Watson first came out and was able to beat chess, it worked the first few times, but then the chess masters actually worked out how to beat it, because ultimately all it was looking for was patterns, whereas in chess there's strategy and patterns. And then when they started giving IBM Watson to a group of junior chess players and putting them up against the chess master, the junior players won every time because they were able to focus on the strategic part of playing chess whilst the pattern identification was done by the machine. And so it's that same way, Adam, right? Like it's allowing brokers and underwriters to focus more on the strategic, the more intuitive, creative part of their role, and having all of those kind of kind of regular type activities done by AI.
Dan, just on that point a bit more, there was a gimmicky article I read not too long ago where you said it relies on the human input, and I think it showed a sequence of numbers that was put into like a chatbot or equivalent of ChatGPT, and it showed that if you just keep regurgitating that same input, so you take the AI input and you re-enter it, fast forward kind of 10 times and you get something that's no use anymore. The numbers have all kind of blurred together, and it's because the human input that it started with has kind of been bred out of the AI operations. And it shows if we rely too much on it and we just think, well, it's going to replace us, it dilutes the human far too much, it becomes useless.
Yeah, I mean it's why we still strongly talk about, human in the loop with these tools and capabilities. They shouldn't just be left to go and do their own thing. There are aspects where they will get relatively good at some smaller aspects, but you should always make sure that you're checking it. Citation is a really key component of the information you get back and making sure you still validate that that's correct. We all hear about hallucination with generative AI and how you can avoid that. I mean, it's quite funny. You can actually just say, do not hallucinate, which is a very weird thing that you have to put into a prompt. But, these are things that are constantly being worked on to refine them. But you're right, like there's still, it still needs that human input.
Joe, do you have anything further you want to add on that one?
No. I think they both covered it. You both covered it very, very well. I think the one thing that I would sort of echo is that AI shouldn't be there to make decisions. It's there to help you make decisions.
Yes.
So it's the data that it can sort of help you analyze and compress is there to help you ultimately make a better decision for your company or your clients or whatever, but it's not there to replace that decision making. And again, to echo Dan's comments, like that data that you are inputting ultimately is going to be it is going to be hopefully better analyzed using these AI systems. These systems are only ever going to increase in efficacy as we sort of use them more and more. But ultimately, the human in the loop aspect is still really, really important. Like we look after a lot of technology clients, and even clients that aren't necessarily a tech business will start to bring in AI more and more into their business. And when we're breaking that into the market and into insurers, one of the first questions we're going to ask is, have you still got someone assessing or reading that data that's coming out? And have you got someone that is sort of checking the quality of that final product? And 9 times out of 10, mainly 10 times out of 10, there is always going to be someone checking it because there's still an element of sort of distrust. And I think with everyone, to be honest, but I think it is just really, really important for all businesses, if they are going to be implementing AI or sort of machine learning, that there's going to be some degree of human checking on that data.
No, definitely. There's a sort of a couple of points I wanted to pick up in sort of your answer, Joe, and then in Dan's answer. But I guess talking about that mistrust, sometimes there is that perception of AI, can we trust it? Is it going to be reliable? What do you think is perhaps the appetite from brokers to really adopt and implement AI in their back office functions? Is there this shift coming where more are going towards it than not, or are sort of firms like Brunel quite unique in that appetite?
I can't really speak for other brokers. I've come from before Brunel came from a sort of really tech focused insurance broker that was very much using sort of LLMs and AI to sort of help back office functions. That's very much happening. I think if you ask a broker that's in one of these sort of large consolidators, they have been swallowed up into one of the large sort of multinationals. I think there's going to be a more of an element of distrust there. We're a very young leadership team at Brunel, and we sort of see the value of investing early on into sort of making our back office as efficient as possible. I'm not saying that AI is subject to just being used for young people, but I think a lot of the mistrust comes from not necessarily understanding it, and a lot of the press that comes around with sort of AI in general. I think if you pare it back, the vast majority of AI systems are sort of machine learning that's been around for a very, very long time. So there's not really been that much. I know sort of ChatGPT is different, and there's been a bit more innovation there, but actually the sort of the actual difference in what's happening now to what was happening sort of 10 years ago isn't that big. But particularly from a sort of business function perspective, I think if you were to look at the sort of deep tech AI sort of software that some of these sort of very mysterious companies are doing, you might be a little bit more scared. But from a business perspective, from a sort of business function perspective, I think that there is a degree of mistrust there, but I think that's only due to sort of a lack of sort of wanting to understand how it could help the business.
Yeah, Joe, to your point, we did a survey recently that looked at, who's actually adopting generative AI in their day-to-day life. And you'd expect, as you said, people kind of think, oh, is it just going to be Gen Z and maybe some millennials? But actually, across the board, we saw about 60% of Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and boomers all actually bringing their own GPT and generative AI tools to work. So I don't think it's necessarily a demographic shift. It's, as you said, Joe, it's organizations who have identified a need for change, and actually realize that they need to remain competitive. And those are the organizations that are going, we need to get on board with this. I'm seeing it from all sizes and scales and shapes of organizations, and it's the ones that have acknowledged that they need to remain competitive that are, adopting these tools.
Sorry, Katie, just to kind of close on that, I guess there's a couple of ways you can look at it, isn't there? There's the point of view that human nature doesn't particularly like change. Everyone's a bit scared of change. I think if you a new system gets implemented within the organization you work for, there's always a bit of, but what about the old system? Or I quite liked this, and there's always a bit of fear around that, and naturally that's there, and you go through that normal process of explaining kind of the benefits of moving into something new, which is that's not exclusive to AI at all. That's just the need for people to realize change. And then I think the overlay with that, which is definitely interrelated, is it's kind of the mystique around AI. Because I think if you rewound 5 years and you asked me what AI was, my brain would go to sentient beings, it would go to robots. So I'd be thinking about Cybernet, Terminator 2 there. I'd be thinking about those sorts of things, where in theory, what I've already talked about on here, AI is a very useful tool that can assist us, and it's not robots taking over, it's not sentient beings, it is very much a tool that can enhance what we're here to do. And I think those things go hand in hand, because there's always skepticism and fear of the unknown and change. And I think there's a big responsibility, if AI is being implemented, to remove some of the mystique to it as well. I mean, spoken down a lot in events like this, or in preparation for events like this, and I've learned a lot from him. He's in the know, and you just realize this isn't, I keep saying this, it's to help us evolve. It's not to overhaul and change. It's a new tool, much like emails were a tool, some time ago. It's something that will allow us to enhance our service proposition.
Definitely, that's true.
And I think just, adding to that, we can make this more adoptable by ensuring, I think you mentioned, ethical use of AI as well. How do we ensure that we're not creating unfair advantages. And so, for example, Microsoft, we have what we call our responsible AI principles. Pretty much any AI company that is offering this now has their own set of principles, and those really center on, fairness. You making sure that we're not creating bias towards certain people, and that's very important in insurance, but also, reliability and safety, transparency. Transparency is a big aspect, especially with this new era of AI, where it is ultimately a black box model. We can incorporate capabilities that allow us to do explainability, so that actually explain how the AI has come to that decision or created that summarization. But all of this really comes down to accountability of the organizations that are implementing it. They need to make sure that they understand that they are, explaining to their own customers how it's being used.
That's a really good point. That does lead on quite nicely to the question I was going to fire at you, actually, Dan. But just before I do, I will just say to everyone watching, if there are any questions you want to ask our panel, please do feel free to pop it in the question and answer box, and I will get round to asking them in a little bit. We can sort of fire away and surprise the panel. But Dan, I just wanted to pick up on the points you were saying there, interestingly, about sort of the ethical use of AI and the hallucination in terms of the risk factor, I guess, in terms that can come with AI. Obviously, I know Europe, for example, has done quite a lot around sort of legal framework around the use of AI. There's a few sort of more voluntary measures that have been going on in the UK. But what's the appetite like, really, in terms of putting more structure around how to use AI within businesses safely, I guess?
I think it comes hand in hand with actually adopting it. I mean, I haven't seen any of the customers I work with saying, yeah, we're just going to go and turn this on and not worry about the implications. That has to be part of the thinking. We actually talk, when we're advising our customers, ethical use, that your ethical plans for the use of AI should be the beginning of your AI strategy and how you actually implement it. Yeah, that would be my view on that one.
Definitely. Does anyone else have any view on the sort of the ethical use of AI within businesses?
Not any definitive view, Katie. It's definitely an area that I want to learn more about as things. We as we talked about, AI comes. It needs a human input. Now we know prejudice exists in humans. Of course, it does. So we need to be aware that the human input can lead to biases. It can lead to prejudices, and it's how do you deal with those anyhow? As an organization, as a business, you always make sure all of your processes are fair and they're inclusive and they're not prejudicing anybody and they're accessible to all. But I think it's acknowledging that there was a human input to AI, and that human input is likely to contain the prejudices that unfortunately exist in our existing world. So maybe it's a bigger question to ask how we fix that, Katie. But I think that's a whole new area of tech talk, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That might be the next session. Who knows?
I mean, I will say, that on Adam's point, the use of AI can actually help an organization expand their ethics. And what I mean by that is it gives more people in their organization the ability to achieve more. So, we often talk about, the use of Copilot in Microsoft Teams. If you're having a Teams call with your colleagues, for neurodiverse individuals, being able to actually just quickly summarize what the question was. I'll be completely honest. There's been times when I've had a lengthy question asked to me and I've just said, what was the question? And it summarizes it much simpler. And I go, cool, I know how to answer that. But then even, if you think, obviously this is veering a bit away from broking, but if you think about developers, using generative AI tools, you can actually code much quicker now. And if you, especially people, disabled individuals, being able to actually type faster as well, this is where these things can be really powerful and actually create much more inclusiveness across your organization.
Great, no, really useful, guys. I've had a few questions come in, so I'm going to fire them at you. We've had a question from Hannah that asks that a lot of stats showing that AI projects fail. Why would you say that AI projects fail in the insurance sector? Is it due to the lack of trust, or are there other reasons? Don't know who wants to pick this one up.
I think there's a lot of saturation. I think the sort of the insure tech was a buzzword, and it has been a buzzword for quite some time. And there's been a lot of innovation, particularly in the personal lines space, in terms of sort of the revolutionizing the sort of customer journey. And I think that there has been a lot of saturation there. A lot of that we do a lot of, as I mentioned previously, we look after a lot of tech businesses as clients, and a lot of these tech businesses have sort of brought out. I don't necessarily think there's an issue in AI in general. I think there's just been a downturn in sort of investment in technology, and because of the sort of macroeconomic climate anyway. The few AI sort of startups that have been sort of in the insurance industry that I have seen fail, I think there have been some cases where the founders haven't necessarily understood the real issues that brokers or insurers are facing. And I think that comes from people not necessarily being on the coal face and being in the industry and really sort of getting to grips with what would actually help firms. So I think that there has been a case of that, but I think to answer the general question, I think the macroeconomic climate hasn't necessarily helped with that. There's a lack of powder, lack of fundraising in terms of sort of yeah, a lot of these VCs have really sort of stepped back with investing in sort of because the AI was obviously a massive buzzword as well, and I think that has taken a bit of a step back as well. We've seen there's been a lot of consolidation in the sort of tech space. A lot of firms are being sort of bought out. So yeah, to sort of answer more generally, I think it is just a sort of a general downturn in the environment.
Just to build on that and kind of the subject matter there, Joe, around kind of investment and the bars around AI, certainly, I guess like last year, any business that wanted any investment, all they had to do was kind of say that
AI, yeah,
they did some AI, because you know, we got it in good authority from several investment houses and legal firms to say they were advising their clients that if you want investment, you're involved in data, you're involved in possible large language models, chuck AI on your kind of script of business activities, and you're likely to get some investment. So there is that Basel, there was that Basel. Yeah. Probably has part back slightly when there's the realization that it's not quite as out there as it perhaps might seem. But I think what that buzz has created, certainly this won't be exclusive to the insurance industry, but it's certainly created this view where I guess top execs in large organizations are hearing the buzz around AI, and they're saying we need to use AI, right, let's get AI in. And you know, they will just start saying, right, we're using AI, but they won't give thought to how. They won't think, well, how do we need to use it? Where is our use case? Where is the justification for it? So in answer to Hannah's question, I guess the failure might come when there's a real excitement about what it is, but not how it's going to be used. And it's almost, we want it, but we don't know how. And then it's kind of being brought in and thrust upon business units to use it. And those business units are kind of sat there like, well, firstly, I don't even know if we need it. But you're telling me you've got it, and that can then lead to an issue because it's trying to, you know, perhaps fit a square peg into a round hole. But certainly where there's understanding and there is a natural use case that ends up at the solution of AI rather than starting with the solution of AI and finding somewhere to fit it, then, you know, you definitely will see more success.
Yeah, building on that, I think especially in, you know, large organizations, reasons it can fail is inadequate sponsorship. So obviously Adam and Joe have spoken about where there has been sponsorship, but there's also the aspect of inadequate sponsorship, and maybe it's only been focused on by a small group, or it's only been focused on by like the technology organization as opposed to sponsorship from the business as well. But the other component is you know, we are in a fail fast world now. You know, as we move into more agile practices, we do need to be, you know, approaching these different experiments as how might we, and actually seeing what we can get. You know, in previous software development, it was you knew exactly what you were going to build. You built a web page, so you knew what you needed to write, and you got the web page, right? But talking to our some of our Microsoft engineers, they were explaining to me that we now have to look at these AI initiatives by going, we think we can do this. Let's see if we've got the data to do this, you know, and you might find out that actually the data you've got in that specific use case isn't good enough yet. And you actually need to work on building the quality of that data. But then you might find another pocket of data that's actually really rich and can enable you to incorporate AI into your processes. So I think it is a continuous journey of fail fast and, you know, try something new to succeed.
Great. No, thanks, guys. We've got another few questions I'm going to try and squeeze in before we finish. But one that's come through, how can AI help with extracting information from fragmented legacy systems?
Two ways. It's one way is actually leaving the data. I mean, Joe's mentioned a couple of times now, kind of structured versus unstructured. You know, we often see structured as, you know, databases, Excel spreadsheets are a form of structured data, and unstructured being PDFs, Word documents, or even images themselves, right? And one way is actually just to leave the data in that state and use generative AI technologies to search or reason over that data. So that's one way you can do it. We are also seeing organizations actually process through all of that data and then actually pull it into a structured format. I won't go into too many techie terms. We very much, you know, that's kind of that lakehouse architecture where you take it through different evolutions of getting more quality out of it. Legacy systems are hard. If I think, you know, some organizations have policy admin systems that are written in code that is probably unknown by a lot of people now. There are actually organizations that or technology companies that are using AI to understand how that code is written, and instead of translating it like Google Translate, actually just defining what is that code supposed to be doing and then converting it into a new language. And that allows you to get the information out of legacy systems, because what we often see of old systems is they can't be cooled continuously, otherwise they kind of just fall flat. So you need to transform them into you know, a cloud scalable type manner. But yeah, I worry I'm getting too technical now, but yes, it can be done using AI.
No, that's really interesting, actually. And the next question kind of picks up on a point you raised as well, actually, Dan, earlier about sort of the climate impact. So it's asking, what specific strategies can organizations implement to reduce the carbon footprint of their AI deployments? So the person references articles about energy consumption, for example.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. I mean, well, obviously it is a question that commonly comes up, and I think it's in the same way that data itself. So data itself uses a huge amount of compute. So that in itself is generating a lot of carbon footprint. Um, as AI models are evolving, we're definitely seeing them become much leaner. But what I would say is you don't always have to use the best model in the market today to achieve your use case. So if you're using like, so GPT 3.5 was really kind of the first that came to market in 2023. It's much simpler. It has a much smaller kind of, like, I say smaller in the vast terms of generative AI, but it's much smaller, so it actually has less of a carbon footprint impact. And so, you know, see what you can do with some of the older models, and then only use the more advanced models where you really need to as well.
That's really interesting. And I've got another question that's come through, might be one for sort of Adam and Joe, about what AI can do for the customer experience in explaining insurance more simply. As we know, there's a lot of jargon.
Yeah, there's some kind of like blue sky thinking you can do here, or maybe it's not quite blue sky yet, because you know, these things are being mooted and talked around. But you think about AI powered insurer wordings, for example. Imagine there's an AI engine built into a wording, so that rather than call the insurer or underwriter and ask them, you know, about a particular exclusion or whether something will be covered, or helping you with the definition or something like that, typing it into you know, a chatbot function that will answer that for you based on the information contained within that wording. That feels like, you know, a real kind of kick forward. And if it was done correctly and effectively, that could, you know, really help brokers with providing quick and succinct responses to clients.
And you could, even bluer sky thinking, Adam, you can extrapolate that even further to the point where the client could effectively ask the same question of their policy wording. So you could have a customer portal where the client can log in, they see their policy documents. If they've got a query about the cover, whether or not they're covered under that policy, they can just type in and ask the question, and it sort of, obviously, that's probably going to be quite far down the line. But the idea of the fact that clients can ask and answer their own sort of questions due to these large language models, I think is quite a nice idea.
Yeah, I will temper that in, and I love those ideas, and I think definitely we're seeing like organizations think about that. I think any other broker thinking of adopting that type of approach, try and think of the maturity of use of these AI capabilities. Focus first on what can you do with your internal processes. Really get familiar with what AI can do, where its constraints are, and then as Joe and Adam have mentioned, like start thinking about how you can surface it to your customers as well. But I think there was quite early on a postal company just turned on Gen AI for their chatbot, and people got it to actually start swearing at them. So you need to make sure that you're actually testing and hardening and making sure you fully understand what these capabilities can do.
And I mean, just off the back of that, do you think there's even a vague risk of sort of that Gen AI element, not replacing the broker, but almost stepping in and doing a bit of the broker's job in helping to clarify sort of the policies and covers that clients might need? Or is that a risk?
I like the idea of like a virtual broking assistant. But yeah, I think with what Dan mentioned with the swearing and stuff, I think that's put me off slightly. But yeah, I think there is definitely like when we get midterm adjustments and requests from clients to sort of policy schedule certificates midterm, like that's definitely something that can be automated. And I think there is a definite use case there for this sort of virtual assistant that's in the customer portal that can effectively sort of answer and sort out the more mundane questions that still take some time for us to handle at this stage.
Okay, great. I've got one more question that's popped up, which is quite good timing considering we're approaching 11 o'clock. Someone's just asked about the name of the tool, Joe, that you're using to extrapolate data from proposal forms. That's the one you're building at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've got a technology partner, Recorder. So yeah, they're the ones that are helping us build that system internally. So yeah, they are available to chat to though.
Great. I think that's all the questions from the audience. So I'm just going to close with sort of one more question to fire at each of you, if that's okay. I'd love to get your thoughts in terms of, we've discussed a lot of use cases and sort of ideas around what firms are doing at the moment, what's kind of in the near future. But for you, what would be the sort of the ideal of where you'd like AI to be in terms of either broking or insurers back office, the impact it can have? Where for you is perhaps that missed opportunity that isn't maybe being explored as fully as it should be?
I mean, the buzzword of 2025 is agentic AI. That really is kind of the next evolution of what we're doing. And Joe, I think you mentioned earlier about like, incorporating automation. Automation isn't new. In fact, it came, everyone was doing it before, but actually the blending of automation and AI, you can get so much more from it. But yeah, I think we'll definitely, 5 years time, we'll be in a situation where you need to step back and go, what are we actually trying to do? We're trying to help customers get the cover they need. We're trying to help brokers make decisions. And we're trying to help underwriters make decisions. That's ultimately what we're trying to achieve. And I don't think it'll be confined to specific tools. It'll be actually, a one entry point, and we'll get the information we need.
Yeah, I can't really add anything more to that than Dan. That was a pretty solid answer.
That's fine. Adam, do you want to try and top Dan's answer?
I definitely won't try and top it. I can give my less esteemed views on it, perhaps. But it harks back, in my view, just as an industry, we need to think about how we can use AI to help us underwrite better. And I think that will be the case. And I think that will be the case across the board. But I think we're always incredibly busy. I know that's not exclusive to the insurance industry, but the age old saying I always have when I'm speaking to brokers is, "Oh, it's supposed to calm down in the next month," and we always laugh and joke about the fact it never calms down. There's always work to do. The minute you stop doing something, there's always something else to pick up. There's always something to do, and I really feel like AI is a source to, and I keep saying about kind of officiate the mundane, just take care of the bits that allow us to not bounce from kind of mundane job to kind of more impactful job, but just allow us to do the impactful stuff.
No, definitely. 100%. Well, that's a great sentiment to finish on. Thank you, Adam. And thank you to Joe and Dan. Adam, thank you so much for sharing your views with us today. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you with us for our very first Tech Talk Live event. So absolutely thrilled. And I feel it's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. So thank you so much. Obviously, there'll be the video will be available on demand afterwards, and there'll be coverage on Insurance Times as well. So thank you so much, everyone. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks very much, guys.